afternoon and welcome to the Yeovil College University Centre Research Festival 2022. My name is Deasy and I manage the Yeovil College University Centre. I am incredibly excited and proud to share this work with you today. At Yeovil College University Centre, we have students studying undergraduate degrees and higher and degree apprenticeships across a range of subjects, including business, computing, creative industries, engineering, social work, childhood studies, care and education, and teacher training. Today, you will hear from students and staff across a range of these subject areas. On that note, it is really important to us that staff are also included in the Research Festival. Research isn't just something that our students do in order to pass an assessment or achieve their qualification. It's something that informs our culture. Our staff are engaged in research across a range of different areas, including both subject-specific research in the disciplines that they teach, but also research into education and pedagogy in order to continually improve the provision we offer at Yeovil College and Yeovil College University Centre. Beyond this, research isn't just something that happens in educational establishments. We have some truly incredible employers and businesses in our region who are at the forefront of research and innovation across a breadth of disciplines. Indeed, some of the presentations you'll hear today are from students who were inspired by something that they observed or a problem that they encountered in the workplace. These students have brought their academic knowledge and their work-based expertise together in order to come up with innovative solutions to problems. Before we get into it, there are a few bits of housekeeping to share. This event is being broadcast live via YouTube, so if you're watching live with us on the 22nd of June, welcome, and it is wonderful to have you with us. If you're accessing the event live, you'll notice that there's the sort of live chat comments function, and you are able to engage with that. A number of our student presenters and our staff are in that chat space and are willing to talk to you and answer any questions that you have. If it's after the event and you're watching this as a recording, then that's great too. You can still access the event, but there won't be that sort of instant live chat feedback to engage with. So on that note, as I've alluded to, this will be put up on YouTube after the live broadcast has happened. So if for any reason you aren't able to stay for the full duration live today and you want to catch up later, or indeed you watch something and it's just so good you want to watch it again, this will be there live and then also a recorded version to catch up with later. The rest of the functionality is very similar to what you should be used to on YouTube. You can make the video bigger if you want to. You can access closed captioning if you want to, much like you would with any other YouTube video. There is a schedule for today, which you'll be able to access via a link in the description. It covers the subject areas that we're going to hear from. It gives you the titles of the presentations, and it also gives you timings by subject area. So if for any reason you need to sort of dip out and dip back in, you'll know when the different subject areas are starting as a sort of an approximate guide. So, today's Research Festival is subtitled Problem Solving in a Changing World. And ultimately, that is what research is. It's all about solving problems. All of the people presenting today have had a moment where they've identified a problem that exists, or have spotted a pattern that they couldn't quite explain, or have just had a sort of I wonder what if moment, and they've then gone about trying to solve that problem or explain what they've observed. Sometimes it can feel like research is something that happens in far off places to people in big dusty libraries wearing, swooping robes and funny hats. But actually, research is something that's happening right here in our community. These are regular people and professionals who are curious about the world around them and are trying to explain, understand, and most importantly, improve things. Research is a really, really important thing. It will be an integral component in solving so many of the challenges that we currently face, both globally and locally, and indeed in overcoming challenges we've yet to see in the coming years. Our students have a diverse and wonderful range of specialisms which will springboard them forwards into solving a whole host of problems. How do we use our knowledge and expertise to push the frontiers of scientific innovation, including how we propel ourselves forward into the carbon neutral future of aerospace and engineering? How can businesses grow and develop in a post-COVID world? How do we keep pace with the digital revolution? And how do we ensure cybersecurity is continually improving to keep us safe, both in our personal and our professional lives? How do we nurture and support the development of the next generation, who will ultimately be picking up the baton to carry on so much of this work? And how do we ensure that alongside all of this development, we are a fair and equal society where everyone is supported, empowered to achieve their potential, and nobody is left behind? The presentations you will see today will just be scratching the surface of the incredible wealth of research that takes place at the University Centre. Our presenters will be sharing an overview. They'll be talking about the questions that they set out to answer. They'll talk you through the process that they undertook to answer that question. Was it reading what other people had done? Was it research? Did they do focus groups? Were there questionnaires? Did they physically build something? How did they go about it? And then they'll be telling you about what they found out. If you've got further questions about any of the topics today, pop them in the chat. We would really encourage you to engage. 5 to 7 minutes is a real condensing of what for most of our learners is 6 to 12 months worth of work. Most of our presenters are there today and will be able to answer your questions in far more detail. And the few that aren't there necessarily, we do have a few people that have had to go to work today, but actually we've got staff there who'll be able to help you as well. The presentations today will cover a breadth of topics. I'll give you a bit of an overview now of what you can expect. So first of all, you're going to hear from our students on childhood studies, care and education. So these students study a range of different aspects of child development from the age of 0 to 11, social developments, academic developments, educational developments, and that whole breadth of other things that sit around a child's life. Your presentations today are going to look at different things. We're going to find out about things like inclusion in mainstream schools and what impact that has upon schools and upon teachers. We're going to find out about the impact of service order assignments on services children, the emotional impacts of having to move potentially several times during childhood upon those children. We're going to be thinking about adverse childhood experiences, something referred to as ACEs in education, and actually the importance of central relationships to children with ACEs. And we're going to be learning a little bit about the training and development needs of staff working with children with disabilities and emotional support needs. So that's a real breadth of different areas we're going to be looking at there. And all of our students in childhood studies, care and education are also in practice. So they are working in early years, integrated services, primary education, somewhere in that sort of space. And all of their academic knowledge is applied to what they're experiencing in practice. After childhood studies, care and education, we're going to be moving on to social work. Our social work students deal with some of the most challenging topics across any of our learners in the University Centre. And today is no let up. We're going to be finding out about barriers to accessing end-of-life care for homeless individuals, and we're going to be finding out about the experiences of minority ethnic students and how we can best support those students to achieve their potential. So both really challenging but really important topics about totally different forms of potential barrier and injustice and how those could be overcome. After that, we're going to be learning about computing and digital innovation. So first up, we're going to hear about cybersecurity, in particular in the context of working from home, obviously very much in the zeitgeist at the moment, and how our approach to cybersecurity, in particular for businesses, might need to change and adapt in a flexible working culture. We're also going to hear about an amazing piece of national research the college has been involved in about chatbot and the inclusion of AI in a learning experience. After that, we're going to move on to engineering, and we're going to hear from students across both aeronautical and mechanical engineering specialisms. The topics you're going to hear cover a range of different areas in engineering. There's both some very consumer-facing topics, things like improving the design of a car roof box and actually the sustainability implications that could be there. And we're also going to hear from some slightly more theoretical concept stuff that might be more involved on an industrial scale. So thinking about tilt rotor sweep and BERP blades. So in very layman's terms, how we can best make sure helicopters stay up. The final final section you're going to hear from today is you're going to get to see a collation of visual outcomes from our creative industry students. These are students studying a range of creative disciplines, things like graphic design, media, photography, surface print and textiles, 3D design, concept art and visual effects. And you're going to get to see some of the amazing visual outputs that they've come together with. So that is a bit of an overview of what you're going to see today. I do really hope you enjoy yourself. I am incredibly excited and so proud of what our learners have accomplished and the amazing work that they have undertaken this year. As we said at the start, please sit back and enjoy. If you want to engage in the chat function, please do. We would love to hear from you. If you've got any questions after the event, then you can always get in touch with the University Centre. Our details will be down below. But for now, we're going to move on to our first section, which is Childhood Studies, Care and Education. First, we're going to hear about inclusion and the effect that inclusion has on mainstream primary school staff.
As part of my BA Honours degree in Childhood Studies, Care and Education, I wanted to research the effect of inclusion on mainstream primary school staff. Inclusion is the practice of educating all children in the mainstream school setting, regardless of any special educational needs or disability. Following the Salamanca Statement in 1994, where 92 governments and 25 international organisations came together to discuss and agree a framework for educating children with special educational needs, inclusive practice was agreed as the best way to educate all children. We have seen a year-on-year increase in the number of children with diverse needs educated in the regular school system of many nations, including our own. Inclusion has been well researched regarding its effect on children both with and without special educational needs. The research shows us time and time again that inclusion has no losers among children. Children benefit socially from the diversity and awareness that having all learners together brings, and all children benefit academically from having differentiated learning, peer-to-peer support, and carefully designed lessons to allow everyone to access the curriculum. In contrast, there has been little research into the effects that inclusive practice has for school staff within mainstream settings. As a teaching assistant within a mainstream primary school, I have experienced firsthand the increase in inclusive learners and have witnessed experienced teachers and staff suffering with their mental health and well-being, which is where my motivation for this research project was born. My research is a qualitative study with an interpretist paradigm, considering the thoughts and feelings of the participants. Self-reported questionnaires, semi-structured interviews, and a focus group were used to gather data regarding the number of inclusive learners, workload, training, well-being, and barriers to inclusive practice from a cross-section of school staff and practitioners, and the results were used to identify the following themes: SEN provision, staff well-being, training and resources, workload, tolerance, acceptance and reward. The government identified in 2021 that 15% of children in mainstream primary schools have a special educational need, yet the research showed that the actual number of children receiving additional support was between 21 and 57%. The data suggests that the definition of SEND support used by the government may differ from that used in practice, and that many children may be missing from the government's figures. With such discrepancy between actual and reported numbers, accurate evaluation, resourcing, and more importantly, funding cannot be made, increasing the pressure on schools and staff to do a lot with just a little. 77% of participants reported a negative effect on their well-being, with some reporting they are increasingly exhausted, emotionally drained, their home lives are suffering, and so is their sleep, leading to feelings of guilt, low self-efficacy, teacher burnout, and many leaving the profession. With the increasing number of inclusive learners being unrecognised in the national statistics, teachers and classroom staff are feeling overwhelmed and inadequate in their roles, leading to the high percentage reporting their roles are having a negative impact on them. Training and resources. A lack of training was another recurring theme, with many participants identifying a lack of training as being a significant barrier to inclusive practice. Many participants commented that they received little or no training prior to starting their roles, with subsequent training being generic and repetitive. A lack of paid planning time, teaching time, and physical resources were also quoted as significant barriers to providing the best education for inclusive learners. Robust budgets are required to enable staff to receive continuous professional development, with access to all the resources they need to fully encompass inclusive practice and provide the best education for all. Workload. 85% of participants reported an increase in their workload when working within an inclusive classroom. Excessive workloads include increased differentiation, increased paperwork, additional meetings, additional planning, and more time spent preparing resources, and were quoted as having a negative effect on staff ability to meet the needs of inclusive learners, and consequently, a negative effect on staff well-being, stress, and self-efficacy. Tolerance, acceptance, and reward. Given the negative nature of the previous themes, I was surprised to identify the overwhelming positive recognition that staff held towards inclusive practice and inclusive learners. 10 out of 12 questionnaire respondents described the positive effect inclusive classrooms had on them, including the acceptance, tolerance, understanding and empathy that develops between children and adults. Participants recognised the rights of all children to be equally valued in inclusive classrooms and take such delight, satisfaction and personal reward from the achievements and successes of all the children in their care that many stated they could not imagine doing anything else. It was always my suspicion that budget restrictions and government spending cuts would be culpable for the inadequacies of inclusive practice, but the consequences for such austerities had greater scale and depth than I had anticipated. It is my recommendation that until the government recognises the need to increase public spending on education, our current system will continue to fail to meet the needs of children and will continue to drive excellent staff away from the profession. Whilst government spending remains beyond the control of those of us who work with wonderfully diverse children, we can all take small actions to improve the negative experiences of staff. Having installed a well-being box in my staff room with small items such as chocolate, posh coffee and other treats, staff have embraced the idea, and many continue to contribute items to be enjoyed by anyone who needs a little pick-me-up. The staff room was also declared as a confidential area where staff members could speak freely, without repercussion, about their concerns and frustrations and receive support from one another. To anyone not in practice, I would ask you this: be kind to teachers, be kind to the support staff you encounter. We are all human. We want the very best for your children just as you do, and we are doing all we can to achieve this, often at great personal sacrifice. Thank you.
going to hear about the emotional impact that service life has on children during the change in assignment orders. So actually, if children are having to move around regularly, if they're part of a service family, what impact does that have upon them emotionally?
Hi, my name is Helen and I am a BA Honours Childhood Studies Care and Education student. The curiosity towards my research proposal came from the personal interest. I have been involved within the military community for 14 years now, where I became a wife and a mother. I spent 10 of those years working within childcare settings in the heart of the community. While having the opportunity, I felt it necessary to conduct my research within this field. The purpose of this study was to investigate the impact service life has on military children during assignment changes. Assignment changes vary across the tri-services, but usually every 2 to 4 years. This project was created because of an intrinsic desire to support military children through their transient lifestyle. Due to the limits of a 10,000-word essay, I narrowed my focus to 4 main categories. Mobility, which includes parental separation, transitioning, education provisions, and resilience. The literature collected within this study gave a plethora of angles to focus on. However, the literature clarified that education settings have various ways of delivering pastoral support, transitions, and file transferring. Therefore, the transitions from school to school within the child's life were not harmonious, identifying the limited use of legislations created for this purpose. While working and supporting military children for many years, the identification of gaps within different settings was noticed by myself, and I could relate to the literature gathered. Therefore, my development of a strong, enthusiastic passion to create deeper knowledge and produce effective practice for the benefits of the children was a must. The methods used to address this research project were through an interpretivist paradigm, and data was collected through adult questionnaires, children's artefacts, and conversational interviews, which allowed the child's voice to be heard. Analysis was made mainly from qualitative data. Quantitative data was also present throughout my findings, which I analysed using a software program. I had a 50% response rate out of 70 respondents, and I discovered that 3.5 was the average amount of times a family had moved home. 34.1% of children had moved schools 5 to 8 times, and 50% of my respondents had 2 or more overseas postings, all agreeing that overseas postings provided better education for their children, as there is a much deeper understanding of what the child required. It was referred to like private school education. Service Pupil Premium is a government-funded provision provided to all schools in England for children from military backgrounds aged 5 to 11 years to provide pastoral care. Only 77% of my respondents were aware of Service Pupil Premium, and my findings highlighted families that were aware were not always happy. Schools have free rein to spend the money where they seem appropriate. However, many families found that it was not benefiting their child directly. The biggest discovery within my research was that early years foundation stage children were not in receipt of any support unless they were found to be on low income. Early years foundation stage provisions set the standards for learning and development of children from birth to 5. The Development Matters states that children require the most support from 0 to 5 years old, as this is the time where they develop the most, continuing to state that all children deserve equal chance to succeed. However, 100% of my respondents stated they had never received any additional support for their child while in nursery during parental separation or transitioning. This picture is drawn by a 3-year-old who shows clear mixed emotions. The key findings of my data collection were the lack of consistency found within schools, the difference in quality provisions overseas, but most surprisingly disproportions in providing pastoral support to early years settings. It was evident that not all settings are adhering to legislation set out by the government and the Ministry of Defence. The Armed Forces Covenant was introduced to mitigate these problems, and although they have military families' interests at the heart of their legislations, it seems there is still a lack of knowledge to be able to provide the most effective practice that includes suitable pastoral care, good quality transition, and correct file transferring, which are all attributes that have been linked to reducing stress on the families during these unique circumstances. Because of the gap in provisions, I launched a petition to include Service Pupil Premium within the whole of the EYFS to support military children from the earliest age possible, which currently has 158 signatures, so still a long way to go. I also calculated the additional cost of including the EYFS manifest with recent found figures. I emailed top politicians that are involved with the welfare and education of children across the country, including the Prime Minister, with the hope to raise awareness of this gap in provisions. However, I'm yet to gain a response. Thank you for listening.
going to be looking at the central importance of relationships on children who've experienced adverse childhood experiences, what we refer to as ACEs in the education profession.
Hello, my name is Carly Dunn and I am currently studying the BA course in Childhood Care and Education. I'm going to be talking about my research project titled A Study into Recognising the Central Importance of Relationships for Children with Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs. My life stories have contributed to the practitioner and researcher I am today. One of the lenses I view my work through is that of an emotional literacy support assistant, or ELSA. The need for ELSA is constantly rising, and developing a safe, trusting and supportive relationship has become the most important part of all my lenses inside and outside of work. McCaffrey explains that early events in people's lives, particularly in their childhoods, have a significant influence on how people grow and develop, their physical and mental health, and ideas, feelings and behaviour. A young person's physical, emotional and relational well-being serves as the foundation upon which they will construct the remainder of their life. Stress and traumatic events can shake this foundation, and if a young person is left to confront these issues alone, they may fail to heal. Driver and Campbell discovered that having a positive school experience and a warm and open relationship with their teacher or childcare provider are both important protective factors in their study of quantitatively evaluating risk and protective variables. The methods chosen were questionnaires, a focus group, and an activity involving children to gain varied viewpoints from disparate factions on the significance of relationships, especially for children with ACEs. The study included a focus group with 5 ELSAs and an educational psychologist. Questionnaires were also distributed to practitioners in various employment areas inside a primary school, with 18 returned. Hearing and respecting the voice and experience of the child was always something I wanted to include in this research. To obtain their viewpoints, this activity is based on a well-known narrative and movie, Matilda. Due to the nature of this research, it would be unethical to reveal personal problems and experiences, thus discussing these matters through the topic of Matilda. All participants agreed that communication is essential in developing connections with children, especially those who need it the most. Communication is essential according to 100% of questionnaire respondents. However, one participant noted that the term ACEs was potentially placing a deficit upon the young child, and another added that potentially it could be changed to lived life experiences. This shows that these experiences are still there, but focuses more on the protective factors rather than the determining factors, allowing practitioners to delve into the root of the problems. Trust and support were the only words shown by all questionnaire respondents, with kindness and understanding chosen by 17 of the 18 people polled. Collins added that relationships with these characteristics are more likely to result in resilience, which Henderson state can help the child understand and regulate their emotions. Within the child activity, the children believe that if there is trust in a relationship, they do not need to keep their worries inside, which assists in safeguarding children. This quote emphasises the importance of creating an optimal atmosphere to maximise learning potential. They go on to say that the children cannot be themselves around Miss Trunchbull, which Con found to be an important aspect of a positive relationship. Considering life is structured around relationships, this study respondents stated that giving children the opportunity to bond offers them a good, healthy start in life. My data analysis revealed that there is a clear link between communication, trust, and the environment. I created a model that depicts my thinking based on my findings. If communication is good and effective, trust grows, which has a direct impact on how the atmosphere and surroundings feel. Similarly, if a practitioner is educated and trained in how to best support individuals with ACEs, they may establish a calm, caring learning atmosphere, which can help to build trust and improve communication. Communication looks at the verbal and non-verbal way to support. Trust is thinking about what practitioners do, and this then builds the environment. Cogs were chosen to symbolise my concept, since it is thought that they all interconnect, and if one is missing, the relationship will be less beneficial. Throughout the day, relationships between children and adults are formed, maintained, and broken. Children will follow the lead of whomever they perceive to be the most influential adult. Relaying this information to all staff is critical for me. As a result, the training proposal has been prepared for submission to the head teacher. Although the training is specifically designed to support children with ACEs, it has been found that the approaches used will support all children. With the high demand for ELSA support, a whole school approach to relationships could free up sessions for children who truly need it, while still providing appropriate support for all children. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
going to be looking at the training needs of educational staff working with children with different sorts of emotional needs and disabilities.
Hi, my name's Alana Steele and I'm a current student at the Yeovil College University Centre. I am currently studying Childhood Studies, Care and Education, and I'm in my final year of my BA degree. I'd like to talk about my research in non-teaching classroom staff receiving enough training to support the students with special educational needs and disabilities in their everyday roles. As a professional within the education sector, it brings me opportunities to research further some of the thoughts and feelings that I've had whilst working with students in education. I took upon this piece of research from the lens of someone who has worked as an apprentice to become a TA, a senior TA, and to become a trainee teacher next year. In research conducted by De Bono, it could be considered that within the teams I have worked in, I've taken on multiple roles and enjoyed the perspectives wearing metaphorical hats. Undertaking a large project like this piece of research was originally daunting. However, once I was able to set the foundations, it was clear what I wanted to find. I wish to cover this project in a qualitative, interpretive piece of research, which made me think about my own personal views and how I needed to ensure that I didn't create bias which would not align with the information that I was researching. I wanted to find out if professionals who are working with students within special educational needs and disabilities are getting up-to-date quality training which provided support that they wish to work on. The research was primarily focused within the special school, focusing on the support staff, with some comparisons to professionals who worked within mainstream and other alternative settings. It should be acknowledged, however, that from the onset, children were not directly interviewed or questioned as part of this research topic. To ensure ethical considerations were maintained throughout the project, it was believed that children as participants would not be beneficial. However, this does not mean children were not listened to and their voices were heard through the opinions of professionals who work with them daily. For my project, the data used was in 3 different methods in order to ensure triangulation and a lack of bias sway. I sent out questionnaires, I conducted an interview with a TA who works one-to-one with a student with SEND, and a focus group which was made up of professionals from a multitude of different settings within the education sector. Once all of the data was collected, key themes were present. Number 1, communication. That is towards both the children or students within the setting or with their colleagues. Communication continuously was mentioned throughout the data collected and shows how much professionals are required to communicate throughout their everyday role. Number 2, the training, skills and interests. The Department for Education suggests that teachers maintain their individual qualities and bring them into the classroom when appropriate. Especially within a special school, introducing students to new opportunities is actively encouraged, as within society today, they do not always get the same opportunities their mainstream counterparts have. This theme also indicated that staff have lots of interests which they feel that they could be used within their setting but are unsure how to share this information with their leadership team. And finally, number 3, the policies and procedures. They were heavily mentioned as this was the overarching theme of this project. This was the opportunity for me to understand how different settings worked and if the lack of formal policy when asking for training was a universal experience or done just from setting to setting. Overall, I wanted to seek if schools have a formal policy surrounding how to get training. It's commonly known that professionals are told to keep a record of their professional development. However, a simple and condensed method appears to be the resolution. Within the focus group, only one participant recognised that their educational establishment has a formal process of receiving training, and the other participants gave a suggestion on how they may be able to apply and attend for relevant training. However, this continued to be an informal process. As my findings suggest, many of the participants suggested speaking to their senior leadership team. By using the formal policy that I published within my research project, a simple form will be able to be used across all educational settings, which is transferable and able to be kept centralised without the issue of being lost or forgotten about. Thank you for listening to my research project.
from our social work students. So our social work students study with us for 3 years to become fully qualified social work professionals who can then go off and work. Today's presentations are no different. We're looking at different forms of injustice. First of all, in the form of access to end-of-life care for homeless individuals and some of the barriers that exist there. And next, looking at the experience of minority ethnic students. So that might include topics around things like racial inequality and discrimination. So there are some really challenging questions we're going to be asked in this next set of presentations.
Hi, I'm Anna Marie, a social work student here at Yeovil College University Centre. I've just completed my second year and moving on to my third year in September. The thing I'm going to present to you today is a literature review around what are the challenges facing people who are homeless, accessing palliative care, and what we can do to support them. The objective of this research was 2 questions. What are the challenges facing homeless individuals accessing palliative care? And what can services do to support people who are homeless to ensure that they receive the right care at the right time? There was some eligibility for inclusion in this literature review. They had to be peer-reviewed articles, they had to be really recent, so from 2018 to 2022, and they had to include keywords homeless, palliative, and barriers. I read a total of 12 articles and selected 5 that would be beneficial and relevant to this literature review. Some of the findings that I found were that there are several barriers to accessing palliative care. They could be structural or physical. Structurally, services are often inflexible, and physically, individuals may not have the means to access healthcare appointments, so they might not have the bus fare, for example. That relationship building was often really difficult due to chaotic and transient lifestyles, but it's really important to build those relationships so that people are getting the right care that they need at the right time that they really need it. People who are homeless can lead really chaotic lives, and for services to remain person-centred, we need to be changing the way that we act with people and take our services to them, because not everything's always going to fit. Another finding was that homelessness itself does not kill. It's the often left untreated but treatable medical conditions that will have a severe impact on people who are homeless. And we need to acknowledge that sometimes those medical conditions will really impact a person when they have multiple health needs. As a discussion, individuals can be homeless for several reasons. They would really usually have experienced a really tough time. For example, there could be financial difficulty or relationship breakdowns, or addictions or unprocessed childhood traumas. Studies showed that people who have 4 or more ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, for example, abuse or bereavement, are more likely to be vulnerable to homelessness. Or it could be structural barriers, for example, lack of affordable housing or unemployment or poverty. Individuals who are homeless often die at a much younger age than those who are housed in a stable way. For male, the life expectancy is 47, and females are even younger at 43. And those chaotic and transient lifestyles may impact a person's accessing health and social care. People experiencing homelessness often have difficulty accessing those services. Not knowing where you're going to be sleeping makes it incredibly difficult to think of anything else. Homeless individuals may have a severe mistrust of the system. That would come from people, services and professionals over-promising but under-delivering on what they can actually achieve and offer someone. And stigma is another serious thing. Homeless people often feel stigmatised, and qualitative studies of lived experience told us that people were being kicked or belittled or stigmatised for their situation, and often they have a low sense of self-worth and feel undeserving of care and support. So what is palliative care? So palliative care is a holistic approach to looking after the whole person, whether that's spiritual or social or psychological. It doesn't just look at the illness or the symptoms. At what point a person is in need of access and end-of-life care can be very difficult to determine based on the health trajectory. Studies showed that it was often easier to access palliative care as a cancer patient if they were told that they were terminally ill, but with a person who has multiple health needs, for example, drug or alcohol dependence and mental health needs, coupled with health needs, the health trajectory is really difficult to predict. So it's really challenging for professionals to know how long a person has left. One individual spoke of their experience, witnessed a person who was about to access end-of-life care, but yet that person still lived for a further 18 months. So the importance of research. Recommendations were made in a study in 2018 to position a homeless champion in a hostel, which they rolled out across 3 homeless hostels in London. And 2021, they did some research based on that implementation of that homeless champion, and they found it was really beneficial for multi-agency collaboration, and it really pulled people together, giving that person the right support and the dignity that they deserve when it came to the time that they needed that end-of-life care. What can we do? We can respond flexibly and in a timely manner, and we can accept people for who they are. We cannot expect individuals to access palliative care the same way as a person who has had stable accommodation their whole life. Many of the individuals across the studies said that they would not feel comfortable being forced to fit into a system that they have lived outside of for the largest part of their life. We need to train hostel staff to recognise when someone is really poorly. We need to work collaboratively across agencies to ensure that we can get that palliative care at the right time. And we need to listen to people and enable them to live well. What living well means to me means something completely different to somebody else. What all the studies told us overall is that the most important thing that we can do as services and professionals is to listen to those individuals that we are supporting. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, my name is Ken. I'm a second-year student, social work student with the University of Gloucester. Today I'm here to discuss about the experiences of Black and ethnic minority students during placement. This is a question that was posed by a student in a support group following numerous attempts at passing his course, failing constantly, failing to get any feedback, and seeming to get nowhere. So this was a question that he posed to his lecturers, finding out what he needed to do to pass the course. According to the National Union of Student Statistics, the chances of BME students to fail the course, get referrals, deferrals, or drop out of the course is a lot higher than for their white colleagues. And the reason for this is the fact that there are so many experiences that BME students have had while out in education. Although the discussion is mainly about placement experiences, I'm going to introduce it as part of the overall classroom discussion, as is simply an extension of classroom learning. So one of the first issues that often cropped up with students' experiences was their invalidation of issues that they raised when they had concerns. Often well-meaning people talked about things like, you're being too sensitive, you're taking it out of context. They didn't mean it that way. And in a way, it is very off-putting. My daughter in a secondary school in Yeovil is often bullied for her hair because she is braided. And one of the teachers was telling me they are having banter. No, it's not banter because it is their identity. So in a way, it is something very important. The second issue that students have experienced is discussing topics regarding race and identity. These often tend to be loaded, most especially when BME students are in the minority. It creates a very angry atmosphere in the lecture room when some of these topics are discussed. So most students would rather stay quiet other than broaching these subjects for fear of antagonizing and angering their white colleagues. The third issue that was raised is the reluctance to engage in BME groups that have been created around universities, because then it puts you in a position where you're targeted and identified as a troublemaker. So many students would rather not go down that route. Finally, students often feel invisible, or what we call noticeable nobodies. What I mean by this is, in the classroom, many students have reported instances of where an idea they suggest is only taken after another colleague, often white, restates the idea, then it's kind of validated and it makes sense. So in a way, they feel invisible and noticeable nobodies, as in they are there but they're not there. They can be seen but they can't be seen at the same time. Intersectionability is something very important, most especially when we are talking about power, experiences, and oppression. Intersectionability helps us to understand people's views, experiences, and how their identities have helped shape those experiences. Now, most of the things we often talk about is ageism, disableism, we have racism, and all the other isms. Now, what intersectionability proposes or suggests is that often oppression is looked at in isolation, but it is never isolated. As a black man, I'm middle-aged, and I'm black, I'm middle-aged, and I'm disabled. So in that situation, I'm facing oppression on three fronts. I face disableism, I face racism, and I will face ageism. Now, in a way, all these work together to explain the experiences I have. The most important thing about this is people's experiences are individual. They're never the same. If I had another BME student, we might in general face the same operation, but in a different way. Most of the operation we face is different based on our personal identities and characteristics. This is why intersectionability is very important. In addition to understanding oppression, intersectionability will help us acknowledge a person's or an individual's experiences because they are their own. So we need to understand where they're coming from, what kind of life they're living, their socio-economic levels of living the experience, whether they're disabled. So we cannot lump people together. We cannot treat people as the same. We need to treat them as individuals. Secondly, we need to celebrate diversity throughout. It is no use having a tokenistic Black History Month here and there thrown in once in a while. Let's take the example of LGBT rights. We have these on our email footers. We talk about it. People wear lanyards, and this is the way we should approach supporting BME students to make them feel included. We can establish support groups that will enable open and honest conversations. Often this is a challenge because people do not have anywhere to talk or people to express to how they feel and what is going on in their lives. By having support groups, it creates a safe environment where people are free to say things that do not offend other people, but most importantly, it's also a forum for people to learn. And the lived experience of the people experiencing the oppression is fully given an opportunity to be heard. There is a strong need for strong leadership by the universities and managers and leaders. The topic of race, as divisive and as difficult it is to talk about, is very important. It's very important to be seen that race is being talked about right from the top to the bottom. This should be on the agenda. People should be talking about race. Our leaders, our lecturers, our support staff should be talking about this. Once it becomes a topic, then everybody can fully get involved. There is a strong need to have mandatory induction training for all staff and students, for them to have a better understanding of racial inequality, intercultural awareness, and any microaggressions. Like I mentioned earlier, my daughter is being bullied, and it's banter. It's considered as banter. So these are things, and sometimes it's not because people don't know. It's simply because they believe it's banter, it is harmless fun. So this mandatory training helps people understand the boundaries that should not be crossed so we can live in a happier society. Thank you very much for watching.
Karen Foster and I am Head of Resource Innovation at Yeovil College. Yeovil College was chosen as just one of 3 colleges in the country to build and test a new chatbot for further education. The chatbot is an automated digital assistant designed to answer your inquiries. You may have seen chatbots on computer service web pages for things like Hermes deliveries, British Gas, and even high street retailers such as Marks and Spencer's have digital assistant chatbot for your first line web inquiries. Chatbots are built to understand written text and give a suitable response. They are programmed to understand what is being written, even though questions can be asked by many different people in many different ways. The most advanced chatbots also use programmed artificial intelligence to learn and produce better responses the more diverse the questions it is asked. IBM described artificial intelligence, or AI, as artificial intelligence leverages computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. This project is being managed by GISC, who are a government-funded body to support the development of technology in further and higher education. GISC has set up the National Centre for AI in Tertiary Education, which is a research and community of practice group funded by the government to explore how artificial intelligence can enhance both the student and the staff experience in the further and higher education sector. We applied for this chatbot project, which is being managed by the National Centre for AI, as we felt Yeovil College was ready to take our first exciting steps into the artificial intelligence software market. As well as joining this project, we've also been working with the GISC Futures team over the last 4 months. We've been working on a college vision project for 2035. Although we did ask staff to look beyond the next 15 years and consider 2050, as this is such a key date for net zero and was very fresh in our minds. This project, over 6 sessions with GISC, involved 30 staff across the college, from senior managers to managers, teachers, business responsive staff, business support staff and technical staff. The types of AI visions that they came up with include marking and assessment in AI, smart campus technology in predicting learner activity, perhaps to aid timetabling, smart individualised learning plans for students, for example, learner-centric assessment pieces, following on from how well they might do in a virtual class. The use of digital assistants with both staff and students, for example, to help students organise their day and their time more effectively, depending on how they actually work. This is a particularly interesting vision for the next 15 years, as a chatbot could be considered the very first steps into this technology. I've recently been working on a different project with an expert in AI, and she is building personal assistants for students in FE. We are predicting that these digital AI personal assistants will follow students through their whole lifespan of education, from primary to secondary to college to university and beyond into employment. We are fully aware that AI can only be effective as the data in the systems it's drawing from. To this end, we've made a concerted effort over the last couple of years to look at our central management of data and also our learner systems, with a constant long-term view of the use of AI to enhance both the learner experience but also the teacher experience and workload. A year ago, we appointed a learning business systems developer with a core aim to bring the learner digital systems experience together and exploit technology like AI in the future. Think about all the different systems we use in FE. At Yeovil College, we have Moodle 365, Growfar, Smart Assessor, Heritage, WisePay, Talk Campus. That is a lot of systems to ensure that our data is consistent. This is a long-term project, but we're enthusiastic to ensure all our learner systems have clean data ready for AI future advances. We know, for example, that this chatbot project expands to collect information from our systems, that information it needs to collect must be accurate, clean and easy to extract. The chatbot project in summary. We were given around 250 questions from Bolton College. They already have been developing a chatbot called Ada. These questions came with some key words or iterations, which we had to Yeovilise. Bolton College have been pioneering in in the education community and have been building their bot for around 4 years. They've been sharing their experiences with the National AI project. We answered the questions that Bolton gave us, and we noticed quickly that we had to fill in some question gaps. These were mostly follow-on questions prompted by the answers that we completed with the Bolton questions. For example, the original question might be, how do I get help changing my password? The answer would be, you can get help with changing your password by contacting the Learning Centre. And a new question might be, where is the Learning Centre? JISC then built the bot for us based on our answers, and then we tested it. We probably had around a 50% success rate in the answers during the testing. So we revisited the questions in the answer set and tested it again. Although some students helped us with this testing, we need a larger audience to do a larger scale testing. And we've reached the point of launching the full test bot to the whole college, and that will happen in early May. Student engagement with the project. A small group of about 10 students participated in the user group forum with JISC. They looked at the ethics of the bot, for example, if it should have a personality or be male or female, or if it should answer more sensitive issues or not. I purposely did not join this conversation. The staff in the room were a member of the library team who teaches digital skills, a member of our iZone or help team, and a member of IT services. This small group of staff mentioned, and myself and one of the students from the ethics group, reported back to JISC on some of the test results that we were having. The main item that we all came up with was the nil response. We wanted, if the chatbot did not know the answer, we wanted a response that was suitable so students didn't feel like they were being turned away if they were asking something sensitive and really needed some help. The next stage of the testing was with 3 groups of students. We had 2 groups of IT students and a group of business students. And this prepared us for launching, for the whole college launch and test in May. And finally, we had to make a decision where we were going to put the trial bot. We decided on Moodle, as we don't really have a landing page on Teams at the moment currently for students. So students will access the bot via Moodle and need to log in to test it. What has the chatbot experience given us so far? Data is key. This project has already been a valuable insight into how the management of data will influence the future of what we do. For example, we've just moved from Tutu to Talk Campus, meaning the back-end work in the chatbot had to be done again to ensure that the signposting is effective. Consistency is key. We've tried really hard to make responses positive and fairly generic, signposting students back to key services such as our iZone team or the student experience team. This has probably been the biggest challenge, finding a balance between a good response but ensuring that learners always have an answer that takes them back to a real person if they're still unsure. And our nil response. We think getting this right is critical. We're currently working with the phrase, sorry the chatbot did not find an answer. We are here to support you. Please speak to any member of staff or contact the iZone team. Thinking like a student. My favourite example is from one of the team. How do I contact a cleaner? The toilets are dirty. That was the question that came from Bolton. We were thinking like a student. What are the iterations going to be? The toilets are minging. Safeguarding and well-being. And finally, when would a student use a chatbot? Launching the final test of the chatbot across college. And just before that time, we had a sudden panic about the question sets not being responsive enough to learners who might be very vulnerable, such as very anxious about exams or feeling really low. We have other systems to support students, such as Talk Campus and previously Tutu. Therefore, we are wondering whether maybe the focus of the chatbot might be better suited away from these sensitive issues and that learners are clearly guided back to Talk Campus instead. For example, at the start of the project, one of the colleges was interested in a bot that answered all of the finance and bursary inquiries. And at the time I thought, we don't need that. But now I can see why that would actually work. Overall, maybe we're trying to be too broad in this project and answer everything for everyone. And that's definitely something to think about going forward during this major testing phase over the next year.
Pearce. I am part of the H&D Computing Group, and for the Yeovil College Research Festival 2022, my question is, to what extent has working from home affected a business's security both digitally and physically? A brief overview of the presentation and what I'll go through. First off, I'll introduce the question, a little bit of background, and why I chose that question. I'll go into some research approaches, primary research and secondary research. I'll make note of some key discoveries, and then I'll come to a conclusion at the end. So, a brief introduction. So again, the question was, to what extent has working from home affected a business's security both digitally and physically? A bit of background on this question. So during the pandemic, many businesses were implementing a work from home basis, either fully, sort of half and half, or fully in the office with some restrictions in place. The table that you can see to your right details a proportion of UK businesses identifying cyber attacks each year. This is taken from the government web survey, which has been going for the past 6 years. And you can see that in the years leading up to 2020, when the pandemic started, businesses were implementing safer solutions, and so the percentage of businesses reporting were going down. When the pandemic hit, the number went up, and then over the years leading up to where we are right now, businesses are now more thinking carefully about what solutions they're implementing, thus the number is slowly going down. But what I want to investigate is, has remote working played a factor in these numbers being produced? So why did I choose this question? Well, first off, I work as an IT technician at a school, and so I have experience with helping people with their security issues, managing their devices and such. And I have some small interest in security and wondering how we can keep things safe. So for the research approach, it was divided into primary research, which is getting information from specific people via things like interviews and questionnaires, and secondary research, which is a more broad perspective over a group of people from research already conducted or from articles. So for the primary research, I conducted a questionnaire to 29 people, the main amount of responses I got, and I asked a variety of questions. So things like ratings, so like 1 to 5 stars, multiple choice questions, so selecting different options for like saying what devices you own, but I didn't include any open-ended questions. For my question, I needed specific details rather than personal opinions. What I had to keep in mind with primary research is the ethics. So what people don't want is for me to take the information that they give and use that for other purposes other than the research project. So I included a statement saying the information given that you give will solely be used for the research project. It will not be used for anything else. With regards to secondary research, I looked at articles to do with problems from working from home, security issues, but also then surveys, government surveys giving me some good solid statistics from professional sources. A couple of key discoveries from the research. So I asked my questionnaire to people, have there been any security issues with your device? Most people said no. Whilst that can be a good thing, i.e. great, there's no issues with your device, for me, it can also be the point of confidentiality. And if they're working for a business, they may not want to give that kind of information, particularly if they work in something that deals with confidential information, so like IT, they don't want to give out, we had a breach on our system, XYZ. For devices, most 75% of people said that they use a personal device for their work. Now, whilst this is good because they know that device in and out to some extent, in terms of work, it could be a security issue because if you're not IT knowledgeable enough, you may not be able to detect certain issues to your computer that someone that works in IT might. And so any work issue ones leading to this question, if it's managed by the business, the IT is able to monitor it through certain software, and then they can say, right, this issue has arisen on this person's device, we can record the issue, let the person know, tell them what to do, give them a call to help walk them through it. To come to a conclusion on this, has remote working affected a business's security? From the research I've taken, yes, I can come to the conclusion that it has. But has it done it to a large extent, i.e. significantly, and in a negative perspective, or has it done it minimally, i.e. to a small extent, to a positive perspective? I think it's done a bit of both. So going back to the table you saw earlier, it has, when the pandemic first hit, it has affected it to a large extent, because many businesses were rushing, they weren't paying attention to security issues, and so many issues were arising. Once the pandemic started to recede, businesses were thinking more carefully, they were thinking, right, we put this in, is this going to happen? We need to cater for this. And so they were thinking better, more logically rather than rationally, and so they were able to solve the symptoms of any issues arising, thus the number was going down and keeping a steady pace. Just a bibliography here for the table. That's the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions in the chat if needed. Thank you.
today, we're going to be hearing from our engineering students. You're going to hear from both aeronautical and mechanical engineers today, so we've got two different specialisms going on there.
I'm Anthony Chiu, and I'm a Leonardo degree apprentice studying my HND at Yeovil College. This presentation gives an overview of the investigations I did into morphing rotor blades, specifically to be applied to tilt rotor aircraft. A tilt rotor is an aircraft which can take off like a helicopter and fly like an aeroplane. It does this by rotating the direction of thrust from the propellers. There are some limitations on what you can do with the current design of rotorcraft due to the fixed shape of the rotor blades. For example, under forward flight, the rotor blades are too large, but in hover, they're too small. If the blades could be made to morph and adapt their shape, then a significant reduction in fuel burn could be realised. My research aims to bridge a scientific gap to prompt thought for the future of tilt rotor aircraft. The goal of my project is implementation of a morphing rotor blade can reduce the fuel burn by 5 to 10% in tilt rotor application in both hover and forward flight. Stage 1 contained the literature review and numerical analysis. Literature reviews included a varied amount of research into the design of morphing rotor blades. The majority of existing research focused on helicopter application, where designs of morphing rotor blade included variable twist, variable camber, and variable chord. However, I decided that a variable span rotor blade would be most efficient for tilt rotor application, whereby there's a small rotor diameter in forward flight, and as it transitions to hover, the rotor diameter increases. One of the principles used to evaluate the hover efficiency was the momentum theory, whereby numerical analysis compared the AW609 and a variable span tilt rotor. The AW609's maximum takeoff weight is 7,500 kilograms and has a rotor diameter of 25 foot. By increasing the rotor diameter to 30 foot, we can see a 30% decrease in disc loading. Using these same parameters, the ideal power requirement would also be reduced by 25%. This decreases the amount of power required for the same rotor thrust. Therefore, by increasing the rotor diameter from 25 foot to 30 foot, we can reduce the power required to hover. Along with analysis for hover performance, numericals were applied in order to identify the benefits in forward flight. The AW609 has a cruise speed of 145 meters per second. Propulsive efficiency is the ratio of useful power compared to the power input. In the case of forward flight, the useful power is the energy used to provide thrust for a given flight speed. By reducing the rotor diameter to 20 foot, we can see an 11% propulsive efficiency gain. Therefore, this reduces the fuel required, and due to the reduced amount of drag, allows for an increased top speed. Stage 2 of the project was to evaluate the most effective morphing rotor blade design. In order to investigate this, I conducted CFD and wind tunnel analysis for all the blade designs. These were a seamless extension, fin, root, and outer blade design. CFD, or Computer Fluid Dynamics, uses computer software to simulate fluid flows and solve problems. I used the MRF process with 6 million cells within my 3D model. Lift is visualized with areas in red indicating a high pressure and areas of blue indicating a low pressure. We can see that the outer blade design creates the most amount of lift. An important finding is that the root extension performed very similarly to the fin extension. This is due to the variances in the area as well as the rated air velocity. Drag is the force which opposes the motion of an object relative to its surrounding fluid. The result illustrates how the coefficient of drag increases more significantly at 0 to 40% rotor extension. This is due to an increase in parasitic drag due to the increased surface area, as well as induced drag due to the creation of vortices and the subsequent airflow separation. Isolated analysis of rotor tips and a static simulations have been captured, where the high pressure underneath the blade wants to equalize with the low pressure above. The mixing of these two pressures leads to the creation of vortices. We can see that vortices form at the 75% for both fin and seamless extension. However, on the outer blade, the vortices form at a much further in, at around 20% blade chord. This leads to a much larger vortex being produced. The creation of vortices are a disadvantage as it leads to a significant blade-vortex interaction. This increases pilot workload, vibration, noise, and maintenance costs. To validate the CFD results and draw a reliable conclusion, wind tunnel testing was also carried out. 3 models were produced and analysed on CFD, which were subsequently 3D printed and sanded down and placed in the wind tunnel. The blades were progressively extended from 180mm to 230mm and tested at 0, 5 and 10 degrees. The graph shows the lift at 10 degrees for a wind speed of 90 miles per hour. This study confirms that as the blade span increases, the lift also increases. An important thing to note is that the lift does not occur linearly compared to the blade extension, but the result does confirm a correlation between CFD and wind tunnel analysis, whereby the most amount of lift was created by the outer blade. As the blade extends, the drag also increases. In the CFD analysis, the root blade had the least amount of drag, but in the CFD analysis, the thin blade had the least amount of drag. We can speculate that this may be due to an increased amount of form drag due to less streamlined geometry. The lift-drag ratio is a fundamental principle of aerodynamics, where the lift is compared to the drag. We can see that the outer and the thin blade have the highest lift-drag ratio, followed by the seamless and finally the root. A high lift-drag ratio indicates an efficient blade design. The wind tunnel testing also allowed for two major observations to be observed. An aeroelastic oscillation occurred as a result of the interaction between aerodynamic, inertial and stiffness of the blade. This vibration is a disadvantage as it can cause structural failure. As we extend the blade, there's an increase in lift at the rotor tips. This overcomes the stiffness of the blade. Again, this bending moment can lead to structural failure, and considerations of these aeroelastic effects will be an essential part to any future morphing rotor blade. Following the completion of stage 1 and stage 2, we can see that by varying the rotor span, efficiency in hover increases by 25%. Efficiency also improves by 11% in cruise. These efficiency gains means less powerful engines are required for the same rotor thrust, reduced fuel burn, and therefore reduced operating costs. The CFD and wind tunnel results allowed a comparison matrix to be devised, where key parameters such as lift, drag, weight, and stress were analysed. From this, the best geometry is a thin extension, where a 7% improvement in lift and drag compared to the worst performing blade. Also, the thin blade presents a natural taper. This improves the lift distribution across the span of the blade. Additional advantages for a variable span rotor is the increase in hover tip speed. This allows for a lower blade loading coefficient, as well as a higher stall margin for manoeuvring. This therefore increases the safety of the aircraft by improving the auto-rotational performance. The research conducted supports the industry demand for innovation, shown by commercial and military-backed ventures, such as the EU's Clean Sky 2 project and the US Future Vertical Lift Programme. The analysis presented shows that hover and cruise efficiency can be improved by 11 to 25%. This is a major achievement in a mature industry where small improvements are considered significant. These advances in tilt rotor design will help us save lives and push us towards our goal of a greener future. Thank you.
my name is Elliott Hall and this is my presentation on improving the efficiency of roof boxes. Let's start with a bit of background to the project. Cars today are trying to be more efficient. For example, the BMW 3 Series plug-in hybrid. This features a 2 litre petrol engine and electric motor, as well as the Polestar 2. This is a fully electric car which features a 245-mile range. But why are the accessories ignored? I thought best to look into it. To improve the overall design of the roof box, to find ways to reclaim otherwise lost forms of energy, and reduce the burden that roof boxes have on the efficiency of the car. Here is all the events. A Gantt chart was used to clearly show each step and keep track of the data. The first step was to create a test sample, followed by creating a new design, comparing the airflow, printing the test pieces, followed by wind tunnel analysis and analysis of the results. Let's have a look at the pros and cons of a roof box. The pros: it increases the overall storage space. They are secure and they are easy to install. The cons: they increase the overall drag coefficient of the car, increase wind noise, which is heard inside the car, and can become costly when featuring roof bars and fittings. First things first, I had to choose a roof box for comparison. For this, I used a standard Halford roof box. The scale model is shown. Then I picked a car model. This was a BMW 3 Series. And then it was time to start creating my own design. A few sketches were shown here of possible ideas with tunnels for possible wind turbines. It was then modelled up in SolidWorks. Next time was the test. The CFD analysis was conducted on the Halford's roof box. The wind speed was set at 32 metres per second, as that is the airflow velocity in SI units, a car at 70 miles an hour. This was also done on SolidWorks. Pictures show the key airflow over the box. As highlighted on this image, there is an area of high pressure right at the nose. This was due to be expected because of the flat face featured on the roof box. It's an area of improvement. On the right hand side, we see the pure airflow over the box. It's very smooth over the body, however at the rear there is some slight turbulence. And the last image shows the wake. The wake you want to be as small as possible and as smooth as possible. As you can see, the wake is slightly distorted near the end and there's a mild bit on the front. This is something we aim to improve. Next was to analyse the new design. Unfortunately, this featured a flat back and a rear diffuser which caused a huge amount of turbulence on the rear. So then the overall design was improved and this was fixed. Here you can see the airflow is much smoother over the whole body without the turbulence. A much smoother airflow over the whole thing in general. On the right hand side we have pressure area and also the wake. Notice how smooth the wake is. Here is the video, the comparison. So on the far right you can see the turbulence on the back end with the flat edge design, and the Halford's looking quite smooth. And this is the issue 2 new design, and as you can see a much smoother airflow was created. The next step was 3D printing. All went well apart from the centre image where we had a bit of an accident. Finally we go on to wind tunnel testing. Different types of data will be collected: drag, lift and downforce. So test on different wind speeds to simulate different speeds of the car, different angles of attack to simulate ascents and descents. All bodies were mounted on a 4mm rod to remain consistent. Unfortunately, all the testing was done without the car model. Here are the results from the Halford roof box. The zero tilt drag coefficient was 0.330, 10 degree forward tilt was 0.630, and a 10 degree back tilt was 0.733. Here is the calculation I was used to calculate the drag coefficient. And here are the results for the new design. The zero tilt drag coefficient was 0.403, 10 degree forward tilt was 0.663, and the 10 degree back tilt was 0.626. Here is a comparison of the key bits of data. Average figures can be found at the bottom here. So the average for the Halford's box was 0.571, with the new design having a drag coefficient average of 0.564. Now we'll look at the energy recovery systems. There are two options, the wind turbine and the solar panels. But how will this help? It will reduce the load on the alternator, which is powered by the engine. This will be less work for the engine to do. It will save fuel. Calculations were done on an 80 amp alternator producing 14 volts. It's also key to note that an alternator is only 70% efficient. Wind turbines are a key part of the design. Unfortunately, there was no suitable product on the market, so estimates were given. The turbines need to be able to withstand speeds of 70 miles an hour, and on average, they should produce somewhere between 30 and 100 watts. For calculations, let's say they produce 65 watts each. It's 130 watts in total with 2 generators. Now we'll look at solar panels. We will look at the top surface of the roof box, and they'll be curved to suit the profile. 1 millimetre squared will produce 200 watts, and they also take up a minimal space requirement. Funnily enough, the top area of the roof box covered exactly 1 metre squared, so exactly 200 watts will be produced. Overall analysis. The calculations on screen are shown. The drag coefficient efficiency improvement was 1.24%, and the total combined power output by the renewable energy resources was 330 watts. This was a saving of 0.48%, so the total efficiency increase was 1.7%. Areas of improvement. I could have used a scale car for the wind tunnel testing, but due to time, I was unable to. More turbines could also have been featured in the design to produce more power. This would have also brought down the efficiency. Also reducing the size of the box. The box was really tall to maintain storage capacity. Perhaps creating a wider would have been a better option. Finally, my thoughts. Overall, I think the project was a success. The outcomes were useful, and it's a good base to continue on further. Also, everyone learns something new, including me and my 3D printer. Thank you for watching. Any questions, please ask.
Scott Heritage, and I always grew up as a fan of the film Top Gun. I always loved to watch Maverick and Goose flying around in their iconic F-14 Tomcat. But the Tomcat isn't just iconic from the film, it's also iconic because of its unique wing configuration. As you can see, it looks like a typical plane wing has been pushed back as far as possible, and as a result, it's called swept wing. Swept wings are extremely common within the aviation industry, especially on aircraft that need to fly faster than the speed of sound. This is because, as you approach the sound barrier, supersonic shock waves begin to form on a plane's surface. The swept wings therefore reduce the drag by delaying the point at which these shock waves occur. The greater the sweep of the wings, the greater the drag reduction, the faster you can fly. Helicopters also suffer from supersonic shock waves, not due to their forward flight speed, but due to their angular velocity of the rotors spinning. This is such a limiting factor of helicopter flight that in the 1970s, the government commissioned a research project between Augusta-Westland and the Army's Royal Aircraft Establishment to create a new rotor blade design. The main objective? To be able to fly faster than ever before. This project was known as Burp, and the design scene was the result of it, in which the rotor blade tip was swept backwards as it experiences the fastest airflow. However, there is one major problem with the swept wing concept that also plagued the Burp blade, and that is loss of lift production at slower airspeeds. That's not to say that no lift force is being produced, but far less is generated when compared to a normal wing or a normal rotor blade. This is where Maverick's F-14 Tomcat has another one up on the aviation industry. It has the ability to variably sweep its wings. And so, during slow speeds of flight, such as taking off or landing, its wings can be spread as far wide as possible. And then as it approaches the sound barrier, its wings can be pulled back in so that it benefits from the supersonic drag reduction. And so this begs the question, if variably swept wings can be found on aircraft from the 1970s, then why couldn't it be used in helicopter rotor blade design? This formed my project question. Should the Burp blade be upgraded to have an active blade tip sweep? After all, if we saw the same benefits on the Burp blade as we did on the Tomcat, then this would allow helicopters to have a far greater liftoff capacity, a faster forward flight speed, and all-round improvement in its mission capabilities. My experiment was simple. I had to create two new rotor blade designs, one with a forward sweep and one with a slightly further backwards sweep. These designs could then be 3D printed and tested in a wind tunnel at various speeds and angle of attacks. This would allow me to obtain the lift and drag data necessary in order to draw a conclusion. And so, I drew the new Burp blade designs as 3D models in Gitta. I drew the new Burp blade designs as 3D models in Gitta. I opted to give the swept forward blade a 10-degree difference compared to the current design, while the swept backwards blade I gave a further 20 degrees difference. I believe that these design changes were significant enough in order to cause a divergence in the results, which would allow me to draw an easy and simple and clear conclusion. The designs were 3D printed and using the college's facilities set up to be tested in the wind tunnel. I chose to test the designs at a large range of speeds and angle of attacks. The designs were then 3D printed using the college's facilities and set up to be tested in the wind tunnel. I chose to test the designs at a large range of speeds and angle of attacks. This would provide me a sufficiently large data sample in order to provide an accurate conclusion. In total, over 650 samples were taken, which gave me over 5,900 data points. And that accumulated in these results. But to give you the refined version, I did see several promising conclusions. At low speeds, I found that the swept forward blade produced 8.3% more lift compared to the current Burp blade design. And at low angle of attacks, I found that the swept forward blade was far more efficient. As for the swept backwards blade, I found that there was no increase or decrease in lift performance. However, at high speeds, I found a greater drag reduction compared to the current design, along with being far more efficient and providing a larger range of control. So this begs the question, can I walk into Leonardo tomorrow claiming that I have the next great idea? Well, no. I also conducted a weight analysis of the theoretical system along with my practical experiments. This system, as you can see, would require a blade-mounted, self-contained hydraulic actuator, along with a large metal rod that would run down the leading edge of the rotor blade. This would connect the actuator to a hinge which the blade tip could pivot about. The weight analysis found that the flight forces of the new rotor blade design would exceed the current safe limits of the AW101's rotor head. But there is still hope for the design. I found in my research that Leonardo conducted a similar experiment on the AW139, and they had run into the same problems as me. Their solution? Well, they conducted a weight-saving exercise on the rotor blade, and that allowed the weight of the rotor blade to fall back within safe limits. If this could be done for their design, I see no reason why it couldn't be done for mine. But there is one other problem, and that's that the rotor blade mounted technologies are still in their infancies within the helicopter industry. There are still numerous reliability and safety concerns that are yet to be fully realised in a full production helicopter. And while there is no evidence to suggest that this will change anytime soon, I can leave you with a very hopeful quote. In the last 20 years, rotor designers have reached a consensus that the ability to continually obtain significant improvements in performance through conventional design optimization was reaching a plateau, and that to make the next advancements in rotor performance, it would be necessary to consider active rotor technology. I therefore believe that my design could still have a future in the aviation industry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Finally today, we're going to see a collation of visual outcomes from our creative industry students. So these are students studying our foundation degree in graphic design, in media, in photography, or in digital design and media across a range of different specialisms, including things like concept art, special effects, 3D design, surface print for textiles, and a breadth of different areas. We might not initially think of the creative disciplines when we think about research. We might, initially think of a whiteboard full of maths equations or something like that. But actually, research and experimentation are an absolutely vital part of the creative process. And our creative industries students engage with research just as meaningfully as our students in any of the other disciplines. I hope you enjoy the collation of outcomes you're about to see.
Kat.
I don't want to talk about it, okay?
We have to, Catherine.
If I talk about it, it becomes real.
It is real.
I just don't want to talk about it, okay? Every time I think about it, it's not in my stomach, just gets tighter and tighter and I feel sick. You don't understand, Andy. I just don't want to be defined by the word cancer. I don't want to be looked at as this pitiful woman who's got this disease. Even if we can find a cure for it, I might never be the same again. I might never have a family. Or I might never grow old with you.
No, I can't fully understand what you're going through. But that's what the hospital appointments are for. They're there for your physical help and your emotional help too. I won't pressure you about this anymore.
No, I know I need to confront this. I'll make an appointment with the doctor.
And I'll be with you every step of the way. You don't have to do this alone.
I know. I love you.
We've now reached the end of the 2022 Yeovil College University Centre Research Festival. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. I really hope that you've enjoyed your time today. I hope that you've had a moment where something's made you think, where something's challenged you, or where something's made you go, wow, that's really impressive. Because I know certainly that that's what I felt all through the creation of this process. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to our students and staff who've participated in today's research festival. We are incredibly proud of what you've achieved and want to thank you for taking the time to share your research with us today. I also want to extend my thanks to the Yeovil College marketing team who have worked incredibly hard to pull this event together and to make all of the beautiful visuals that you've seen today work. So thank you very much to them as well. If today's presentations have got you thinking, and you're thinking, do you know what? I've got questions like that. I've got things that I want to learn more about. I've had those I wonder why moments. And you think that degree level study might be something you're interested in, we would really encourage you to get in touch with us. As you'll have seen today, our learners are from a range of different ages and backgrounds. Some of them do come to us at 18 straight from school or college, but a lot of our students are adults who at some point in their lives have thought, I want to learn more about this, I want to expand my knowledge, and have come back to study. So if that is something that interests you, then please get in touch. You can look at our website, you can email university.centre@yeovil.ac.uk, or you can ring our very friendly team on 01935 845454. If today's session has just got you hungry to find out more and to figure out more things that students have been up to, last year's Research Festival is still online and you're very, very welcome to watch that as well. So once again, thank you so much for your time today. I do hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Take care.